Hey, fellow superhero cinephiles. Did you know that almost 30% of adults say they haven't read a book in the past year? The primary reason why is a lack of time. Well, Audible's here to help with the gift of found time. Thanks to Audible, you can listen to audiobooks like Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, or Slugfest, inside the epic 50-year battle between Marvel and DC. Read up on the history of superheroes in comics and movies with Grant Morrison's Super Gods. You can also check out Vanguard, my original superhero novel series, or try The Vril Agenda or The Adventures of Fortune McCall, both of which were written by our dearly departed host emeritus, Derek Ferguson. Whatever you're looking for, Audible has thousands of titles that you can consume while commuting, exercising, cooking, or just relaxing at home. And not only audiobooks, an Audible membership also gives you access to tons of content like podcasts, theatrical performances, and exclusive Audible originals that you won't find anywhere else. To give you a taste of what you can get, Audible has partnered with this show to provide listeners with a free 30-day trial. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/supercinemapod, and with your free trial, you get one free audiobook and 2 free Audible originals. In fact, you get to keep those titles even if you cancel before the trial is over. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to audibletrial.com/supercinemapod and start your free trial today.
Hi, my name's Arlie, and that's Mondo, Kurt, and Monet.
I'm Jubilee. This is Angela.
So what's your thing?
What's my thing?
They want to know what kind of mutant powers you have.
Oh, I don't know what it's called, but, fireworks shoot out of my fingers.
It's called thermodynamic emission. Kurt has something similar, and that comes out of his eyes.
That's right. I can melt glass and see through pantyhose. Ooh, change those.
Can't see through your clothes.
Well, not yet, but I'm almost there.
It's real subtle, man.
Well, what's your dazzle?
Thermal flexibility manipulation.
His skin stretches.
Your skin stretches? For what? Well, Skin, let's see how well you play football.
They should have gone through orientation and then been formally introduced.
You should lighten up a wee bit, with over 60 mind, which you certainly are a tight ass.
Now, why don't you go and wax your chest hair?
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine. In addition to this show, I do a few other ones, and one of those is called E for Evolution, where me and 2 other X-Men fans, we go through and we're doing a reread of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. And all 3 of us are also big fans of Generation X, and I've had an idea to talk about that movie for a while on here. So I thought I'd ask them to both come on. And so I'd like to welcome to this show, Patrick Lagua and Oscar Owens. Guys, how you doing today?
Oscar.
Okay, I'll go first. I've had a pretty hectic day, but I'm really excited to chat about this movie. Generation X has got a really special place in my heart.
And Pat, I think I may have mispronounced your last name. So if I did, apologies.
It's all right. Lagua.
Okay.
Like L water, as I like to tell people. I'm good. I'm looking forward to chat with this movie, and I'm glad that I've discovered 2 other people who know of its existence. So here we go.
Well, before we jump into that, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves, how you got into comics, all that kind of stuff. Oscar, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my grandparents used to own a news agency, and we would help them on Saturday nights waiting for the Sunday paper delivery. And I would just read all the comics that were in their store. And that sort of is what got me hooked on comics. But X-Men in particular was the cartoon, the good old animated series. That's what drew me to X-Men instead of, well, those little kid comics like Scrooge and Archie and all of that stuff. X-Men sort of was the big grown-up comic books that I started to read. And once you got hooked on it, that was it. I've been a sucker for life now.
Mm-hmm. And Pat, how about you?
I think my lifelong addiction started with those trading cards that Marvel was putting out in the 90s. So like in the Philippines where I grew up, kids would play all kinds of weird games with these cards, but instead I would read the character biographies on the back. And so that's kind of where I started my lifelong obsession with the X-Men.
Yeah, I remember having all those trading cards in the big binder and just unfortunately I don't have them anymore, but those were cool back in the day. I remember looking at those for hours.
I still have mine. I've kept it for so long. It's just been sitting in the bottom of a cupboard forever. I should get them out and see if they're worth anything.
Yeah, just I guess one other digression. We went to a used bookstore one time, and they I don't know how they got their hands on a binder full of like those 1990s Marvel Masterpieces cards with Joe Jusko art, which I just had to buy. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember having a few of those. Was that the Fleet ones or the Flair ones or something like that?
I think Fleer published those.
Oh, okay.
Like they commissioned one artist to do the whole set, and so that entire one was by Joe Jusko.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's some. I don't think if I'm a lot of those artists, I don't think they were credited on the cards themselves. But looking back now, I found out like a lot of big name artists did a lot of those back then.
Oh yeah, like the Hildebrandt brothers, Joe Jusko, a bunch of others.
Derek Robertson, Jim Lee did a bunch.
X-Men run, yeah.
I know Derek Robertson has posted some on his Twitter feed a few times too that he did back in the day. But also, you mentioned the X-Men animated series. That's something I wanted to touch on real quick with some of the Disney Plus announcements that just came out yesterday. And one of them is ties in directly to what we're talking about today, and that's the sequel to the X-Men animated series, X-Men 97. Did you guys have any thoughts about the recent Disney Plus announcements?
Like X-Men in particular, or the whole thing?
The whole thing, but yeah, X-Men in particular.
I'm excited about Moon Knight. I'm very happy they're leaning into like sort of the psychological aspects of the character. And I know people are like, he's just like Batman, but he is not just like Batman, and I will die on that hill. So I was really excited about the Moon Knight parts of that trailer. I'm glad they're doing more X-Men. I just wish it wasn't this X-Men, but I will not begrudge other people's excitement about the thing.
Oscar, how about you? Anything kind of jump out at you with the Disney Plus announcements?
I only seen the X-Men one. That's the only thing that I sort of read about it, but I have great excitement. I'm pumped for it. The only thing I think maybe me and Pat might be the same in that I am a little bit trepidatious. I think that I would like to see something new. I don't know whether it's a great idea to just rehash the exact same X-Men team. Like I'd really be excited to have Psylocke be a character, or some of the new younger characters come through, or even just like Nightcrawler or Iceman or Kitty Pryde, or just some of the big names that weren't really much in the cartoon. Bishop, Cable. That's a great thing with X-Men, right? That there's so many characters and they're all rich and so much there to explore.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to seeing like different costumes as well. But when I think of like the X-Men animated series, that's like the star team, and it's kind of all of their costumes are like their peak costumes. It's what I think of when I think of them. I always think of Storm with that white outfit, and Cyclops with his hair sticking out, and Jean Grey with that yellow blue striped outfit. Yeah, I'm looking forward to a bit of an update, but I'm still excited.
Yeah, I was kind of, I think, Pat, I was very much what you posted on social media. I was very much thinking along the same lines as you, where it's cool, but if they were gonna, but I'd rather see something new. And if they were going to do a follow up to something, I wish it would have been Wolverine and the X-Men, because that ended on such a great cliffhanger. And the X-Men animated series, you can quibble about how well it was done, but it did get an ending at least, and then it got a sequel too in the X-Men 92 comic, which again you can quibble over how well it was done, but it got something. So I'd much rather see like Wolverine and the X-Men picked up again, although I think the rights are still in question with that too.
Yeah. Well, we might be surprised. Like maybe they'll do something like more contemporaries,
Mhm.
but they call it X-Men 97, so I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, we'll see. I'm glad that there's like new X-Men content coming to Disney Plus, though. Like that's a move in the right direction. Maybe they're testing the waters before Kevin Feige starts getting serious about. Well, I'm sure he's serious about it already, but before they start rolling out the big guns, I suppose.
Yeah, and maybe this could lead to sequels to some of those other abandoned shows, like that were, in my opinion, were not as didn't have as much of an impact, but were actually better quality, in my opinion, like Wolverine and the X-Men, or Earth's Mightiest Heroes, or Spectacular Spider-Man. I would love to see any of those three come back on Disney Plus, or all three, if possible. But yeah, that was the main kind of news I wanted to touch on. But today we're talking about, speaking of the 90s, we're talking about the 1996 made-for-TV Generation X movie. And this was an interesting time for Marvel, because they had sold off a lot of their licenses to stuff to help them with bankruptcy. And one of them was Fox had gotten the rights to a bunch of stuff, and so Fox had planned to do a series of TV movies that were also backdoor pilots. So they ended up only making two, because they were terrible, because they weren't well received. There was the Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. one with David Hasselhoff, which is surprisingly better than expected. We talked about that way back in an early episode of this show. And then the other one was Generation X, and they had also planned to do a few more. I think She-Hulk was one they had planned to do at one point, but after the response to these two, they just never did. Now, did you guys watch this at the time it came out? Because I remember when this came out, I think I was still in elementary school, and I remember watching it on TV and recording it, and like being a kid back then, like, and this is like the only live action X-Men content we have. I loved it back at the time, but it hasn't really held up over time. How about you guys?
I did, and I actually found out about it in the very trusty Wizard magazine, because they did an article on it before it came out, which got me really excited. And although I had to now, kids, if you're listening to this podcast, there were such things back in the day called a TV guide, which you pull out to find out what's airing on your local television network. So I had to sort of scroll and read through all those to figure out when it was going to air. And like you, Perry, I also did have to record it, but it just was such a novelty. Like you'd think if they were going to adopt a property, like they would have went for the big guns, right? But they went for this one, which I thought was so cool, so niche. What a deep cut. Although now thinking about it, maybe they were like, well, if we mess it up, it's fine. We're not going to damage Wolverine or Storm or those characters, because it's just this niche book that nobody really knows about.
I suspect that was the case. I suspect that was the case. In Australia, it didn't air on TV. The only thing I knew about it prior to it coming out was, in the comics themselves, they were advertising it with the ad pages. And one day I found it in a Blockbuster, and I was like, oh my God, yes, I have to get this. And I'm pretty sure I was the only person that rented it. And I was like, oh,
I'm sorry,
I finally
there
get
was
to see it.
VHS release of this thing.
Yeah, in Australia, yeah.
Oh my God!
I watched it that way, and I watched it only once on the VHS, and then put it away and took it back to the store and was like, oh my God!
At the store, they were like, "Why did you bring it back?"
Yeah.
They
were like, really, well, you can keep it. You can keep it, man. You're the only one. We only bought it because you requested it, and no one else has wanted it since. But
you guys, I wait. Is this? No, this was not. I went on eBay to see if I could find it, and I got. Oh, wait, it's right here. It's right here, and you can. Oh, you can buy it for $6.68.
Oh wow!
but the shipping is $30 from the United Kingdom, so that may be.
I mean, this is a movie that if I saw it in like the $5 bin at my
Would you buy it? Would you buy it?
I don't think I would.
You don't think you will?
No.
I think I will. I think I will. I think I would.
The completest collectioner in
Yes.
you wouldn't be able to walk past it, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, and it's true because I have stuff in my shelf that I will never read, but I just had to buy them so that the shelf is complete. So I absolutely will buy it.
I feel like with you two guys, I'm kind of like the negative Nancy. I'm the one that's like, I hate that. Oh, that's gross. That's gross. But I was expecting to be like it on the rewatch, but I found that I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would have.
So Oscar, I think we're swapping our usual roles this time because I'm
we
the more
maybe.
negative one on this one.
I think there needs to be a bit of grace given to them because one, it is a pilot, and there are plenty of great shows where the pilots weren't great. They're finding their feet, they're figuring it out. There was huge budget constraints, and I think they didn't know whether it was going to be a show or a movie. It was just like a testing the grounds kind of thing, and it was the 90s. It was also the time frame, so it was coming out at the same time as, say, I think Buffy was coming out that same year, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yep.
And in fact, speaking of pilots, if you watch the original Buffy pilot, not the one that actually aired, but they had done another one before that with a different actress playing Willow, and that was really rough.
So my point exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly my point. I think they were coming out against Buffy, but also like the X-Files. I can see a little bit of X-Files-ish influence in it as well. And I just think they were just trying the flavors of the month and seeing where it landed. And it obviously didn't land well, but I think it would have been potential for it to be a Buffy-esque type show.
And I think just to be clear, I think all three of us will. There's sort of a baseline assessment of like it was not good. So let me just be clear, like it was not good. But
I definitely,
but I think there were just little moments of like hints of okay, they got this right. This part of it was good, but yeah, there is a baseline of like it was not a very good production. So
it's also really weird because it feels kind of like The Gifted in a way, in that it's set in this weird world where the X-Men have existed maybe, but they never mentioned them. Although in The Gifted, they at least acknowledge that something happened to the X-Men.
Right.
But here they're hanging out at the Xavier Institute. Emma used to have students called the Hellions, and there's like this mutant registration. Mutants are basically outlawed. So you get the feel, and they talk about superheroes not as if they're not a real thing, right? When they pick up Jubilee and she's and Banshee tells her, we're training you to be a superhero, and she says, oh, do I have to wear one of those costumes that all superheroes wear? And the way she says it, you don't get the feeling that she's saying it as if like she's talking about comic books or something,
like they're real, right?
Exactly. Like they're real. And then Emma just responds like, oh, you'll be given a uniform, just like it's like the most natural thing. So it was really interesting at that time, because this was a time when you saw superheroes in live action, unless it was like Batman, they were embarrassed to be regarded as superheroes.
And I did get quite a kick out of that. The Hellions mention, like, what a cool bit of continuity in this otherwise hodgepodge mess of a thing that I am experiencing right now.
I seen that and I thought of the Hellions reference as like a hint of the future. Right, that they were, even though they're referencing a past event, I thought, oh, that's a little nugget that they're going to explore later on in the series. I found out later that apparently it was just going to be a series of movies, but TV movies only. But I think it would have done well had it been a series.
Yeah, I think
the Hellions reference was one. The town kids as well. Like I could have seen them being characters later on as well.
Well, also, I mean, they don't really do anything with the whole mutant registration stuff outside of the beginning. So that felt like also like a future plot point to be picked up if it had went to series.
What do you guys think about the casting?
Okay, so well, straight up, this is, I mean, let's be real, the competition is not fierce, but this is straight up the best live action version of Emma Frost we've gotten.
As the chairperson of the Michigan Emma Frost Fan Society, I would have to co-sign that statement. I mean, she's one of the few things that the thing gets right. And also, comic accurate costume. Wig aside, but
wig aside, and
wig aside,
and tinfoil boots.
Yes, but I think she's one of the few things in the show that they did such a good job translating.
Also, it was weird that her jacket seemed a little bit too big, so I guess the tailor could only make one version of it.
Although, actually, if you look at how Bacalo drew it in the comics, it's
okay.
I think the proportions are good. I think that's how he drew it. I mean, I don't know if they meant like I'm not sure if they were like, oh, we need to do it like Bacalo did, or if they were just like, that's what you're gonna wear. But I think it was accurate. Yeah.
She definitely had the best lines, and it was true to the comic character. She's such a great character, and it surprises me that they haven't put her in any of the X-Men films, because there's such a deep reverence for that character.
Well, I mean, they technically did put her in. They put her in 2 films, but
well,
it wasn't really her though.
No, exactly. It's not like what the X-Men Origins, I think, or the Wolverine Origins.
Yeah, she was in that where she played like one of the, and then also in First Class, where she's basically Shaw's secretary.
Oh my God, January Jones. That was the most wooden performance of any character in any film I think I've ever seen. But I'm not sure of the name of the actress that that played Emma in the Generation X film. Sorry,
that was in this one, Finola Hughes.
Yeah, and she seemed to relish in that role. She's still a soap opera actress, I'm guessing.
Yeah, she's been. We were talking before you jumped on, and she's been on like
1,000 episodes. Wasn't it?
1,000 over 1,000 episodes of General Hospital. She's been on it since 1985, and she's still on.
She's definitely got that soap actor vibe, but she looked like she was enjoying it, and it comes across. And what did you guys think about Banshee?
Go ahead, Pat.
I that's another good thing I think that they did is they really did a good job of sort of capturing that bickering parent dynamic between them. And so I think he did a really good job of sort of being like the cool yet still very like holding the reins uncle, right? So yeah, I think he did a good job, even though they had him dressed like he's 2 minutes away from going clubbing at any point. Like he's dressed and he is on the way to the Roxbury, everybody.
I couldn't understand that for the life of me. I mean, I can understand you don't want to go with the blue and yellow spandex that he wore in Generation X. So I get that, but I mean, like, you figure they'd at least give him like a, like the 90s X-Men bomber jackets they all wore or something. But
or even if they want to go cheesy, I remember I think it's around issue 24 or 25 where they had him wearing like this Irish green bomber jacket situation.
Like the Celtics jacket, right?
Yes, I would have gone for that. That would have been cool.
I did enjoy the slight sexual tension between the two of them, that they used to have, where she would outrageously flirt with him to try and belittle him, and he would just rebuff it fiercely. And I enjoyed that they brought that in as well. I think the biggest thing of the casting we've got is that what do you guys think about White Jubilee?
Well, first I want to also mention about Jeremy Ratchford a few other things. One of the cool things is he actually did the voice of Banshee in the animated series too. So, and I thought,
is he Irish?
No, that's the thing. Like, that's definitely not.
He's an actor. Wow. Okay, Oscar. He's an actor.
His accent was, a little bit over the top, shall we say? But overall, I thought he did a pretty decent job. And like you guys said, like capturing I also thought he looked like Banshee from the comics at the time. He definitely kind of lack of red hair aside, he definitely looked that part. And again, he's you compare him to Caleb Landry Jones in, I think that's who played him in First Class, which was okay, but didn't have much to do. So again, we've got the best Banshee and the best Emma Frost in live action we've seen so far. But yeah, White Jubilee. That's just, I guess like they're thinking in the 90s TV studio thinking is like, okay, well, we've got of the student group, we've only got 2 white students so far, right? So we have to have another white student maybe to balance it out.
Was that the logic?
I'm imagining it has to be.
I'm like, but it's like, but you already got like, it already had 3 non-white actors. Just go for a 4th one. Like it's fine.
But that was the logic back then in the 90s. That it's like you can't have too many non-white people as the lead actors in your TV show.
But it's kind of symptomatic, I guess, of like what they do with the other characters, because it really feels like they just sort of took these concepts and character names and then they just ported it over to these very, I think, I know we were chatting about this earlier, this very sort of milk toast type of characters.
Yeah.
Like it feels like like these characters have to go through these motions to like check off plot points, and then we're just going to sort of put this veneer of the code name and the powers on them. Because with Jubilee, okay, well, 1, she's white, and 2, like I didn't really feel, and this is true of her in Skin too, like there wasn't anything on the screen that I felt was like, oh, that's Jubilee and that's Skin. I feel like they got stripped of all the things that made them who they are.
I think basically all the students except for M had that happen to them. Like they were all basically stripped of what they were.
And push back a little bit here.
To be fair, Mondo, we didn't really know, so there's not a lot of room to like,
I'm going to push back here a little bit with this, you guys. The comic had only been out for like 2 years when this came through, so I think they had gotten only up to about issue 25-ish. But I think, well, first of all, just with Jubilee, and this is a little bit embarrassing to admit, but I didn't know that she was Asian.
That's actually fair. Like when I was a kid, I think I didn't really know either from the animated series.
I really did. Like animated series that I didn't think I even once mentioned that she was Chinese. And when I started reading books, she was already a member of the team. And because I started reading the books roughly just before the Phalanx Covenant came through. So there'd been a few around Uncanny X-Men 300-ish.
Yeah, and when and at that time, I believe Joe Madureira was doing the art, and he didn't really draw her as Asian as he had drawn, like, say, Psylocke.
Exactly. And if you look at Generation X, like the first issue, I think the first splash page is Jubilee, and she's talking with Husk, and she's looking at her watch and something. She does not look Asian. She has no Asian features at all. She looks white. So I didn't really realize at first that she wasn't.
I remember that actually Wizard had done one of their casting call articles about Generation X, and they put on there when they picked Jubilee, they said, we think we can get away with casting a white actress for this. And they had picked, they picked a white actress in their casting.
Wow. Well, I think the actress that played Jubilee did probably one of the best jobs on the film. Like, I think she was probably the standout actress for me.
She's also seems to have had the biggest career of any of them afterwards, Heather McComb.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But in terms of what they've got from the character, I think with Skin, I think, like I remembered in the first couple of issues, he was in the computer room, right? And he had that thing about he was worried about getting his skin cut or torn. And I think they just grabbed that bit of his character and explored it to say, well, you're going to be the computer guy. I don't think it just sort of didn't come from nowhere. The only I felt like, the character with her where she was unafraid to show her powers in public, and that was a very Monet character, but I didn't ever remember her being quite as rude and bully. She was like real straight up like aggressive to Jubilee, like, watch yourself, and I just couldn't imagine her being like that. And Mondo was the the one where I was like, well, we really know nothing about him, so they've just turned him into a jock instead of like an overweight Samoan guy that's easygoing. That seemed like the most drastic. But yeah, I feel like they just grabbed little snippets of the character and then translated them to film. Rather than
I will
just...
say that Jubilee had one of the best lines in this movie, which looking back, I'm surprised that I'm not sure if this was like, if this was sent, I can't remember if this was censored when it was aired or what, but when Skin's talking about Russell Tresh the next day after they do the dream walk thing, and she says, "Are you fucking nuts? I cosmically shit my fucking pants." I'm like, wait a minute, that's 2 F-bombs right in a made-for-TV movie.
I'm pretty sure they censored that.
They had to have, yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
They didn't on the copy that I watched.
No, the one we had found was a YouTube video, and yeah, I may
no, like originally. I remember watching it and being like, "Oh my god, Jubilee said fuck."
I mean, she did the best she could with the material she had. I think basically is what we can come down to with her, and she wasn't given whole. Which also I thought was kind of weird for this movie to center it so heavily on Skin when Jubilee's the character everybody who knows in this thing. She's like the biggest character in this movie. So it felt really weird to center it on Skin instead of centering it on Jubilee.
Agreed. I also didn't like how they kind of CW-ified Skin, right? He's supposed to have come from like a really rough part of Los Angeles. And instead he came from like this beautiful house and
although his dad drives this really old truck for some reason that looks like it's from the 1940s.
I was like, this guy is not from a rough neighborhood. That is a much nicer house than mine.
Yeah, they really kind of polished off his edges to the point that, yeah, like this, to me, he was very unrecognizable from the source material. And I mean, I'm not someone who's like, they have to be exactly the same, but I feel like they sort of hollowed out the core of like what made him so interesting in the comics.
I think it was also interesting is that it feels like they were trying to, and again, I'm not sure what the studio logic was, but it feels like they were trying to not make him too stereotypical by going with like, Latin gangbanger kid or anything like that. So they give him this nice house and all that. But when he's talking to Kayla, he's talking about how he's talking about like almost like a gang initiation thing type of thing, right? And then and he's also doing the very stereotypical thing where he's sprinkling in Spanish in all his sentences. So it feels like they didn't really know what they were doing with it. But at the same time, I guess they figured like, oh, we'll just make him a computer hacker and give him a nice house and that'll excuse any of the stereotypical stuff.
I did find as well when he was pursuing that town girl, it made me really uneasy. He was like, when he was smiling off at her, I was like, oh my God, dude, like you look like a creep. Like that's not sexy at all.
Yeah.
Do you guys think they missed the mark there?
I like that whole situation is creepy and like, going to her in her dreams and then working with Russell and just like that whole thing was just very, yeah.
Like I feel like they attempted to try to sort of make it like a very cutesy like a very adorable meet cute type of a situation, but I'm like, that did not work that way.
Yeah.
Also, like the whole idea of the dream sequence, why is that you go into people's minds and then get them to do things that they don't want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's pretty creepy to have a guy that goes into the girl's brain that he fancies to make her then fancy him. It's like, oh, that's a bit. I don't know. I don't like it. It doesn't.
And there's also no real reason for it because she clearly is she's interested in him when they first meet in town, and that's before any of the dream stuff. So it just it feels like a weird excuse to have Russell. Maybe that was something they were trying to do, like she liked you all along. You never had to do this, but never quite translated in the movie. I don't know.
Well, a lot of the relationship things were a bit gross. Like I think with Buck and Refrax, right? He's a bit of a creep to her, and then he apologizes, and she's like, "Oh, everything's wonderful." You know, he like almost sexual. Well, he does talk about groping her. You know, which I was like, "Oh, it's like sexual assault," and then he uses his powers so he can see her naked. And then
in defense, he
gross
was
behavior,
the powers did kick in accidentally, like, and then he shut his eyes there. So that was
we'll give him that. But he did say that he groped her when they were
that was
football or whatever, and I was like, oh my god, that's so wrong. And then he just apologizes, and she smiles, and that's it. All is forgiven. See, girls, when boys be creepy to you, once they say sorry, you just say thank you.
It's also very tacked on, right? It just like we're about to go into this mission. He's like, oh, hold on, I have to apologize to her first.
Oh, it was gross.
And I mean, as I think with a lot of things that happen in the movie, like and I know like the writers make things happen in the script, but here that the sort of like it seems more obvious in that like things just had to happen because the plot required it to happen. Like Skin had to do that so like Russell Trash would be introduced into their lives without it feeling it was very contrived, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
What do you guys think of the new additions to the team? Because they couldn't do Husk and Chamber because of their powers, so instead they brought in these new characters, Buff and Refrax.
Like, isn't Buff kind of Husk already, but with that's what I like. It seems like she's Husk already, with a
basically, just with different powers.
Yes, and also I'm like, why is she embarrassed? Because she's, oh my god, I'm just realizing because she's buff. I just felt like, girl, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. Like, you kick ass. That's cool. I mean, it's such a weird, like, I knew what they were trying to go for, like, you know, growing up and teenagers and your body's awkward and all that stuff. But I'm like, you know, like a lady being strong, I feel like it's not a thing to be embarrassed about.
While I agree, it's not something to be embarrassed about. I did like the idea of bringing in that body conscious issues and her having you know, a real issue with the way the mutation has affected her body, and I thought that was a really smart way to do it. It surprises me that they said that budgetary constraints meant they couldn't have Husk, because I thought, how easy would it be for her to just pull her arm and show like I'm thinking of like, you know, a monster type arm or something, you know, like surely it wouldn't cost that much money. I can understand Chamber being like,
but it costs a lot less money than just having a girl wearing big sweaters.
Right.
That is exactly right. And paying a bodybuilder to do that one little scene with the shirt off, you're correct.
And the cut in that scene is so terrible though, because it's so obvious that when it cuts to her turning, it's so obvious that she's got a regular slim body underneath that.
Yes. Though I mean, like if they have to, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I can understand that the budgetary constraints have affected the roles of those two characters, and obviously I think in terms of Arlie, it saved a lot of money, and she was still like quite an interesting character, and I liked the body issue stuff. But with Refrax, I think I actually enjoyed his character too, and I remember thinking like, I hope that they bring him onto the team in the comics as well. I liked his character. It was interesting. It was something different. It was a bit Cyclopsy, but not really Cyclopsy. That was cool. They were never going to be able to put Chamber on there. One little side note: when I was reading the comics, I always read it in my head as Chamber instead of Chamber. So every time I go to say Chamber now, I have to like question myself, because I've just read it as Chamber in my head for the last 20 years.
For the longest time, I was pronouncing Magneto right, because I think it was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends pronounced it Magneto when I was a kid, and I'm just like, shit, am I saying it right? And then the TV show pronounced, then when the animated series pronounced Magneto, I'm like, okay, I'm fine.
Although I will say for Chamber, I feel like maybe there's a way they could have done it where, because I mean in the comics he has that part covered like the majority of the time, so you could just have an actor come on and sort of be like 2020, have a face mask all the time. Um, and then maybe just spend the money every now and again when when he does the thing.
Well, I mean, you could easily have it like just because it's those straps. So
Or
just
like a
have
little
it pull
bit,
it
yeah,
down,
like
yeah, and then
yeah,
just
yeah,
shoots out
and
that
just
way.
like a little bit, like a little tiny
Yeah.
bit.
Peter,
Although I suppose it could get old, like to the point where, how come he never uses his powers? He just has that thing on all the time.
yeah, I mean, well, Refrax uses his powers like once in the whole movie anyway.
That's true. That's true.
So it wouldn't have been a big deal. I think it was
Mhm.
that part of that was also so they could have that scene where he accidentally X-rays Buff's thigh too. So so they had to have some reason for that kind of thing. Yeah, I thought they were okay. I thought they were good enough characters, although I thought it was weird that Refrax wears sunglasses all the time where he doesn't have to. Like it'd be one thing if at least he had like colored contacts or something so that his eyes are unnatural and that's why he does it. But otherwise it was just weird that he's always wearing sunglasses when he doesn't need them to control his powers or hide his eyes or anything like that.
Because he's cool, okay, Perry. He's
I thought his eyes did look a bit weird. Like, weren't they like a bit bruised around the skin and stuff?
I think now that you mentioned, I think I did remember noticing something like that, but only in the car scene. I didn't really notice it any other times.
Yeah, I thought his eyes did look a bit weird, and that's why he was wearing them. But they weren't like bright colored red contacts or something like that, which they could have been, and it wouldn't have cost a lot to do. You're correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like Mondo was completely nothing like the guy in the comics, but I did think he had some good moments though. I thought his character was written terribly. Basically, he's just written to be the dick jock character. But I did think he had I did like the exchange when they're talking about, he's like, what, you should stay away from Jello. And he's like, hey man, I hate Jello. He's like getting very serious about it.
I didn't realize exactly how Mondo's powers worked until I watched the movie. And I think the movie showed how his powers worked much better than the comic book did. That's one thing that the movie did better than the comics, to grab something and that's what you turn into. I think they ever really showed that in the books.
I think that, so he's basically like Absorbing Man.
Basically, yeah.
Essentially. Okay.
Although it's more visual,
Organic?
I guess.
Yeah.
More visual than Absorbing Man, I guess. Like Absorbing Man, it's just like, I guess he does, but his body seems to change more drastically than Absorbing Man's does.
But yeah, okay. All right.
And yeah, I think you're right. I think it is only organic stuff he absorbs too.
Yeah, I think it's just organic stuff. Because he can't do metals and stuff like Absorbing Man can.
So then that brings us to M. What'd you guys think of her? I did think, I get what you're saying, Oscar, about her being a little bit too rude, but I did like that they made an attempt to give her this kind of like haughty personality and where she thinks she's better than everybody else.
She was such a non-presence to me in the show, like, because M's probably my favorite character on the roster. But yeah, like she just seems to be there to be mean to Jubilee, and then she shows up and she's like, "Oh, I'm haughty, I'm much better than you," but we don't really get a sense of why she would feel that way. Besides, oh, I have a really cool power set, which is a part of it, but like in the comic, it also has a lot to do with her upbringing, like who her family is, the fact that she's filthy rich, and her dad is like an ambassador, like a big political muckety muck, that we don't really get in the show. Like, and it's a limited runtime, but I feel like that's the kind of character development they could have squeezed in for her.
And it wouldn't be hard, right? It wouldn't be hard for them to just bring in some dialogue about how rich she is and how she's really slumming it there with the kids, right?
And who her daddy is, right? Who her father is.
I thought it was also weird that they excluded her flying, because that would actually give her something to do in the scene at the end, in the climactic fight scene when Skin pulls Russell Tresh over the abyss with him. Like, you'd have M fly in after him, and that would actually give her something to do. But
which would be pricey,
to save him, right?
I mean, I think it'd be cheaper than doing the weird rubber hand thing, actually, because all you got to do is have her on cables.
But can we talk about that fight scene? Because I'm still so confused by it. Like, it's all meant to be psychic, right? Like, it's all in the dreams, right? Like, it's not a physical.
Well, she does say it's a dimension,
altercation.
so it's.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's like,
It's like,
so much about this dream
what does
dimension.
that mean?
The whole dream dimension plot is held together with chewing gum at best.
The dream dimension is like the astral plane, right?
That's how I read it.
Maybe, I don't know, but then they're going in physically, and their powers all work just like normal, and they've got all this. I don't know what the hell's going on with that whole thing.
I think the main problem with the scene, despite the plot holes and all of that stuff, is that they were so wooden. They were all standing still. It's like every character was standing still until it was their turn to say a line, and then they would step forward. It was almost like a high school play, the way they had done that. I thought, it wasn't dynamic. It wasn't. There was a lot of problems with that fight scene. It was very anticlimactic, and they could have, whatever money they did have, they should have spent on that.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the director thought if he just tilted the camera and had like a slight tilt of the camera, then that would sort of make up for the lack of everything else.
This director, I'm convinced if Dutch angles were a person, this director would fuck them. Because Jesus Christ, he's in love with Dutch angles.
He
loves them, okay.
And the colored lights, right? The background colored lights.
Yeah.
Let's put a green colored light there, and then for the next one, we'll tilt it to the left, and we'll do a red colored light, and that will just show everyone that this is something, freaky. The addition of the electric guitars I loved, though, so you knew that something was wrong. It was very like Melrose Place, like the electric guitar comes in, okay, it's a bad guy. But it was made for kids as well, right? This show was aimed at kids. Right?
Kind of. Like,
maybe teenagers?
Yeah, I think maybe teenagers. I did think it was also weird with the colors are just so weird in this. I had to change the settings of my TV just to make sense of what's happening half the time in it.
But kudos again to Finola for delivering that line about the portal, like with all the seriousness and like gravitas that she can muster. Because I'm like, that is the most nonsensical thing that I have ever heard.
I think my favorite line of hers in the movie is when they're in class and Kurt asks, how are we supposed to relax and concentrate at the same time? She's like, make believe you're playing with yourself.
Yeah, that was good. That was very good. I was like, oh, wow, I forgot that line. That was probably the best comeback I thought ever.
And that was pure Emma Frost, right? It's exactly something I would see her saying. And then I guess time to talk about the big bad in this movie, Russell Tresh.
Or as I'd like to call him, Matt Frewer playing himself as he usually.
It's like like everyone says, oh, he's doing a Jim Carrey thing. I'm like, well, no, Matt Frewer was doing this before Jim Carrey. He was Jim Carrey before Jim Carrey. But it is.
Well, I'm not aware of him, so I'm one of those people saying, he's Jim Carrey that you bought off Wish. But
I'm telling Matt Frewer you said that.
Well, you can feel free. But I think if Jim Carrey is copying Matt Farrell, then Jim Carrey did it better. Like there was just
if this is your only exposure to Matt Frewer,
this is not his best work.
This is definitely
not his best work by any means.
Did you guys ever watch Supernatural TV show?
I've seen a few episodes.
Okay, he plays Pestilence in the 5th season, I think it is, and he was really good in that. He's like he's got this calm creepiness the whole time, and it's just, and I'm watching that, and I'm rewatching this when he's doing like this manic Frank Gorshin like impersonation. I'm like, actually, he would have made a really good Riddler.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I think Jim Carrey did a good Riddler as well.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that.
I think maybe I have to rewatch it though. It's been a long time, but I think that would be the only Batman villain that I would see Jim Carrey as.
I could see him as because he's done serious stuff, right? I could see him doing a better job if he was doing a serious version of the Riddler, but when he's trying to do the Frank Gorshin impersonation, he just can't pull it off as well as Frank Gorshin did. But yeah, the thing about the dream dimension is just, it's so bizarre to me why they even use this, because they've got the whole mutant registration angle. You've got the whole mutant experimentation thing. I don't know why you need to go into this dream stuff.
Yeah, I don't really see what, like, it's such a weird thing to pit them against. Like, aside
They
from
could have just
yeah,
they could have just gone in and tried to rescue him from taking the part of his brain out, right? They didn't have to do it within the dream dimension,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it gave them an opportunity to dispose of the bad guy and leave it open for the bad guy to come back.
Mm-hmm. Although if this is going to series, I don't think anybody would have wanted to see this bad guy come back.
I suspect you may be right there. I was interested. I was like, oh, why aren't they getting M-Plate? You know, like someone that is after mutants and has a special appetite for young mutants.
You're right. And it's basically, and that is basically the plot of the movie in a way, right? Like it's, it's some creepy guy who's kidnapping mutants for their essence.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's very possible if had they done M-Plate that he would have looked cheesy. But
I mean,
I think it would have been a much better approach, though.
I mean, I wouldn't have even given the budget constraints. I would have been fine if they didn't go the full.
Yeah.
If they just gave him like a mask or something like that, I would have been fine with that.
That's fine. Yeah.
So I think this is the budget light version of M-Plate, right?
Very, very budget light. Yeah, yeah. Also, I thought it was weird how after Skin frees him from the mental hospital, like Skin's obviously in better shape than him. Skin's got his own powers. So how does he kidnap him and take him back to this laboratory?
The power of plot, Terry, and stuff needs to happen. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't get to see how
stuff needs to happen.
It just happens because it does. You know, he just suddenly appears in the hospital to rescue him with all of that equipment. He just magically teleported in, but we don't need to know that.
Yeah, this is also the first appearance of. Then this is another tie-in to the X-Men movies, because Hatley Castle is used as the setting for the Xavier Institute in this, and it's also used in many of the X-Men movies. It was used in the first three movies, and it was used in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse as well, and
Deadpool as well. Yeah.
Wasn't that Casaloma?
No, I think that may have been the one that was used in First Class.
The First Class, okay.
Because there was a different one they used in First Class, but it was Hatley Castle in most of the movies, and then and Hatley Castle. It was also the Luthor Mansion in Smallville and the Queen Mansion in the early seasons of Arrow.
It's on my bucket list of movie set places I'd like to see in real life.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful, and I can see why they used it in the following films after watching it being used in Generation X. It's a perfect mansion.
Yeah, I thought that was and it's a possible tie-in to the movies later on too.
Mm-hmm. Although if we were being super accurate and nerdy pedantic, but they were headquartered at the Massachusetts Academy, though, not the mansion.
Well, yeah, in the comics, but I had looked it up because he had mentioned, because one of the townies mentions Welcome to Hastings, and I looked it up, and I found there's a bunch of places called Hastings, and one of them is a place in New York.
Okay.
So I think maybe they were trying to go for New York there. I don't know.
What would you guys?
Sorry,
I was going to say, what do you guys rate this film out of a 10? What would you give it?
0.5.
I think I would go for like maybe a mid 4. I would say.
Well, that's generous of you. That's generous. I'm
4 out of 10.
How about you? I think I'm gonna modify mine, because I was thinking of, because I had rated this on Letterboxd, but Letterboxd uses a 5-star system. So based on that, it was on a 10-point system, I guess maybe 2.
Yeah, I'm going to be smack in the middle and say about a 3. I say about a 3. It did have some good points to it, and I think to take it what it is, I think it's it was a product of its time. It was a pilot. It had those maybe too big of an influence of the X-Files and Buffy and 90210, and it was trying to be edgy when it shouldn't, but there was still some nuggets of goodness there with Emma Frost and the actual concept of the school for mutants and the look of it, the castle, and the characters were ripe for development. It really had potential.
What do you guys think of the Generation X uniform they used at the end there? Because I thought they actually did a pretty good job with that.
I mean, I'll give them props for that moment. It was a bracing moment, although it looked a bit like the material just looked a bit off to me. Like I wasn't super convinced of its fidelity. But I mean, again, it's all about like translate. Things that look good on the page may not look good on the screen. But they did good for what they had, I thought.
Maybe if they made it more like a leathery material that, like, say, the Scarlet Witch wears in the WandaVision and stuff like that. Like, they made it more leather kind of thing. It might be a bit better. But I still loved how true it was to the comics. I loved the color. I just thought it was great. For me, that was a moment when I was like, oh.
I was a little bit disappointed when I first saw this movie because I remember they showed the clip of Buff in the uniform in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I was expecting to see them in the uniforms a lot more instead of just like that one scene of Buff at the end.
Well, it's interesting they've got that as the thumbnail, right? For the YouTube, when you find this on YouTube, they've got that picture of Buff with the uniform on as the thumbnail. So that really is the true climax, I guess, of the film, rather than the fight with Russell.
Yeah. What do you guys think if this had gone to series? Do you think it would have been? Do you think it would have been worth a watch? Like, do you think it would have been as something like it would be something we remembered, like we remember Buffy or even the Incredible Hulk, or would it be something more like the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man?
What's the Nick? See, that proves your point. What's the Nicholas?
It was the 1970s. CBS did a Spider-Man live action Spider-Man TV show.
Okay,
starring Nicholas Hammond.
I mean, I guess we can't really say for sure, but I feel like Fox got the chance to maybe do it better with a higher budget with The Gifted, but I really wouldn't call that something memorable or like appointment watching either. And
I only watched like a couple of episodes of that.
So I don't know, like I feel like, and I hate to give him too much credit, but it's deserved. Like, unless it's like Kevin Feige and those guys doing it, like I don't have a lot of faith.
I was going to say, I feel like it would depend upon who was in charge, right? If it was,
for sure.
Like Joss Whedon, fantastic job of Buffy. And if he had been in the helm of Generation X, then I think it would have been a success. But I guess what that means, and we're all kind of agreement on this, right? I think the concept is great. The characters are great. It's the execution is where they've failed.
Sorry, go ahead, Pat.
And I think what makes things that are successful, like adaptation successful, is like if they really respect and commit to the concept of the characters. And I didn't really get a sense of that in the pilot or this installment. And so, like, I think if they really commit to the characters fully, it could be good. But I didn't see their intent to do that in the pilot.
Yeah, I think it, and it's weird. It's funny you mentioned talking about Buffy and Josh Whedon, because you think about it, Buffy at the end, it kind of was, high school with superpowers, which because all the other characters eventually did develop powers anyway. And yeah, if they had waited like 2 years before they decided to do this, I think they probably would have tried to get Josh Whedon to do it instead, and it probably would have been much better.
Was Buffy was that a Fox show in America?
WB.
Okay.
Eventually became.
But no, CW. It was Fox produced it.
Right,
WB
but it aired. Yep.
So it was
they owned the rights.
Property. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Maybe they thought that there was, they already had the one hit one. They didn't have to do another one, which is very un-Hollywood, right? Like normally, once you've got something that's successful, then they just hammer it to death.
Well, I think I'm not sure exactly in the timeline, but I don't think Buffy was a real hit at this point. Like Buffy, I think it became a hit after this.
Well, I don't think it was ever like, I guess, like a quote unquote hit, like what they would consider a hit. Like if you were like an ABC or NBC show, like it definitely had like a solid cult following.
Yeah.
And it did really well for the network that it was airing on. But I don't think like the bean counters would have ever called it a hit.
Right. It wasn't like X-Files numbers or anything.
No,
like
it wasn't like Friends
okay.
numbers by any means. Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably why too. And plus this one, because there were a lot of talk about doing this as a TV show. They were planning to do it, and then the ratings on this were and the reviews were just so merciless that they're just like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
Well, the reviews were fair, I think. Merciless, but also fair.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I do wonder though, like did they think they were making something, let's go with okay, because or were they just phoning it in, like, or were they thinking like, no, this is good, what we did was it was as good as it could be?
That's so hard to tell, because I've seen some stuff that I'm just like, these people are not serious about this, and then you hear them talk in interviews and it's like, holy shit, no, they really are serious, they were earnest. So no, but I mean, like there's a documentary about the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie.
And
it's
but
like,
we know that was just to retain the rights.
Well, that was Roger Corman.
That, right?
That was Roger. Not the actors didn't know that.
Oh, the actors didn't know that.
No. Nobody involved in the actual. Nobody who was actually involved in production knew about that. It was only like Roger Corman and the upper people who knew that.
Did he ever tell them?
They didn't find out until later. And like you listen to those actors and they're like heartbroken over the fact that it was not. That it was shelved and everything, and then when they felt betrayed, and they're like, and they had like really taken it seriously, and it's just like, oh my god, these guys are really earnest.
It's just weird thinking like now, like comparing now and back then, where now it's like such a well-oiled, tightly controlled machine with, I mean, there's a lot of quality control, I think, to the point and where people like the regular critique of Marvel, like, it's become rote and routine, like it's the same film every time. But it's just amazing that like back then, before all this came into play, like somebody just created this Generation X TV movie and they thought, I'm just going to be generous and say, what, and they thought it was good. They thought it maybe not good, but they thought it was okay. Like they thought like,
it was before they knew,
okay, this is good, let's put it on air. So
it's before they knew the power of their properties, right? And how successful they could actually be. It was, and I think we need to give it a bit of grace. Again, I guess I use that word, a bit of grace to the fact that it was the first one, and they didn't even know whether it could have been done with live action. I think the X-Men film was really what brought it all out. And I wonder, the thing that I find interesting is like, I wonder how this, besides the use of the sets, how much influence it had on the film, the X-Men film, whether they saw the good nuggets of this and thought, you know what, let's actually put some money in this and see what we can do with it.
But it's different producers, right, Perry? Because I think
I believe so. Yeah,
the Donners, like Lauren Charlotte Donner was like show running. I'm not sure who was show running this thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I know it wasn't Julie. I know that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's directed by Jack Shoulder, written by Eric Blakeney, whose names are not well known, obviously. But it was Avi Arad. He was producing everything back, but he was executive producer, so it's not really
right.
David Russell, Matthew Edelman, so like nobody really well known, I'd say, as far as producers go. Oh wow, the director. Well, actually, this guy did Jack Shoulder. He directed Arachnid and A Nightmare on Elm Street too. So there you go.
Wow.
I know one of those things.
I've seen both of those films, but a long time ago. So I don't know whether I would be able to say whether they were great or not, but I definitely know both of them.
I've only seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which I'm not going to say it's good, but I'll give it credit because it tried to do something different from that. It didn't just try to replicate the first Nightmare on Elm Street. It tried to do
the
something.
Dreamscape as well, right? It's the dream
No, the
world.
Dreamscape came. Yeah, well, involves the dream stuff, but the big Dreamscape with like the kids going on, that was 3 when Wes Craven came back. So I guess maybe he saw what Wes Craven made a better Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, and he thought, "Oh, I'm going to do that." All right, but I think that about brings us to the end of this movie. Guys, you want to tell people where they can find you? Well, first I should say that you can find all of us on if you enjoyed the three of us banter, you can listen to E for Evolution .transistor.fm. That's our podcast where we talk about the Grant Morrison X-Men run. And Oscar, how about you? Any other places?
Yeah, you can see my ramblings on Twitter at ODAT220.
And you can find me in my Tumblr, which is Perfect Fabricate Killing Machine. I also have another podcast called Crocoan Exports that I host with one of my good friends, Pat Loika, where we talk about the current Hickman era of X-Men. And if you need more Emma Frost content in your life, I also mod the House of Frost group on Facebook. So check us out.
Okay, great. And as always, you can find us at superherocinephiles.com and Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Please give us a follow. Please give us a rate and review on Apple Podcasts. And guys, thanks so much for coming on. It was great having you on this show to talk about a movie instead of our usual comic chats for once.
Likewise, thank you.
That's true. Thanks for letting me, giving me the ambition to watch that film again. I actually enjoyed it. For once, I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad it wasn't too painful for you then. So, okay,
thanks, guys.
Thank you. That does it for us, and we'll talk to you next time. You have been listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Super Cinema Pod. Join our Facebook group by searching for Superhero Cinephiles, where you can interact with us and other superhero fans. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a regular supporter at Patreon or make a one-time donation through PayPal, both of which can be found at our website, superherocinephiles.com. If you buy or rent any movies through the Amazon links at our site, it helps support the show. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.